Every night he stood in the same place, same uniform, same clipboard, same gate that opened and closed without anyone really noticing who held it. People walked past him with their phones already in their hands. Some nodded, most didn't. No one ever asked him questions that mattered. They didn't need to. They assumed he would always be there, always on time, always available. And for years, that assumption worked. Until one night, it didn't. Not because he refused, not because he argued, but because he waited. And when he waited, the entire building had to slow down with him. His name was Daniel. Most people didn't know that. To them, he was just the security guard at the front gate, the man who scanned badges, signed delivery logs, and waved cars through without asking questions that would slow anyone down. Daniel worked the night shift. He arrived 15 minutes early every night, not because anyone asked him to, but because being early meant being ready before things started to go wrong. He put on his uniform carefully, checked the radio, opened the logbook to a clean page. The building liked routine. Daniel liked it too. At exactly 10 p.m., the gate opened for the first wave of late workers. Engineers who stayed too long, managers who forgot time existed, contractors who never looked up from their phones. Daniel nodded. They walked past. "Evening," he said. Most didn't answer. He didn't mind. People didn't come to the gate to talk. They came to get through it. Daniel learned the rhythm of the building the way other people learn traffic patterns, who arrived early, who always left last, who swiped their badge twice because they never remembered the angle. He noticed things no one asked him about: a car that arrived an hour earlier than usual, a delivery that came on the wrong night, a badge that was used long after its owner had gone home. He wrote everything down, not because he suspected anything, because that was his job, and because Daniel believed something simple. If something ever mattered later, it would matter when, not how loud. For years, nothing changed. People treated him the same way they treated the gate itself: necessary, invisible. If something went wrong, they blamed the system, never the person standing next to it. Daniel was fine with that. Being unseen made his job easier, until the night the system failed. It wasn't dramatic, no alarms, no flashing lights, just a moment. And a senior manager arrived late, badge in hand, moving fast, already on a call. He swiped once. The reader blinked red. He swiped again. Red. Daniel glanced at the screen. The badge had expired. "Sir," Daniel said calmly, "I need to verify." "Just let me in," the man replied, covering the phone with his hand. "I'm already late." Daniel looked at the logbook, looked at the screen again. "I can't," he said. The man sighed loudly. "You always let me in." Daniel shook his head. "I always check," he said. Tonight, it didn't pass. There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. The call ended. The man looked around, annoyed, then confused. "No one had ever waited at the gate before," he said. "Not for Daniel." And that was the moment something shifted. Not because Daniel said no, but because he didn't rush to say yes. And he waited. And for the first time, someone else had to wait too. The delay lasted less than 3 minutes. That was all it took. 3 minutes for the badge to be verified. 3 minutes for the call to end. 3 minutes for the man to realize he wasn't getting waved through the gate the way he always had. When the system finally cleared, Daniel opened the gate without comment. "Thank you," the man said stiffly, already walking away. Daniel nodded and marked the time in the logbook. Nothing about the moment felt important. Not yet, but buildings, like people, remember friction. The next night, the same man arrived earlier. Not by much. 5 minutes, maybe 10. Daniel noticed. He always did. The man swiped his badge. Green. No words were exchanged, but the pause had worked its way into the routine. Over the following days, other things began to shift. Deliveries arrived with paperwork ready instead of being printed at the gate. Contractors stopped asking Daniel to just let it slide. People started checking their badges before they reached him. No one talked about it. They didn't need to. Waiting, Daniel realized, was contagious. When one person waited, others adjusted to avoid waiting themselves. And that adjustment changed behavior. Daniel stayed exactly the same. He didn't become stricter. He didn't become friendlier. He didn't explain the rules any more than he had before. He simply stopped filling the silence. Before, when something didn't work, people looked at him, expecting reassurance. "It'll be fine," they wanted him to say. "Just go ahead." Now, Daniel let the system speak first. He watched the screen. He watched the log. He waited. People filled the gap themselves. They checked emails. They made calls. They reread instructions they had ignored for years. Daniel wrote it all down, not because it was wrong, because it was different. One night, a delivery driver arrived without the correct clearance. "This is how we've always done it," the driver said, impatient. Daniel nodded. "I know," he said. "Tonight it needs approval." The driver scoffed. "From who?" Daniel looked at the clipboard. "From whoever sent you," he replied. The driver stepped aside and made a call. 15 minutes later, the approval came through. The delivery went in. The driver didn't argue the next time. Word spread quietly, not about Daniel, about the gate. People began saying things like, "Make sure everything's right before you get there," or "He won't rush it." They never said his name, but they adjusted anyway. Inside the building, the effect was subtle, but noticeable. Meetings started 5 minutes later, just in case. Schedules included buffer time that hadn't existed before. People stopped assuming systems would bend for them. Daniel noticed the biggest change during emergencies. Not real emergencies, urgent ones. The kind people treated as emergencies because they were used to being accommodated. One night, a manager rushed up to the gate, breathless. "I need to get in right now," he said. "It's critical." Daniel looked at the badge. Green. The gate opened. No delay. The manager hesitated. "That's it?" he asked. "Yes," Daniel said. The manager nodded slowly. "Thanks," he said, then added, "I appreciate how you handle things." Daniel paused, surprised. "You're welcome," he replied. It was the first time anyone had said that, not because Daniel had changed, because people had. They had learned the difference between urgency and preparation, between importance and assumption. Daniel noticed fewer raised voices, fewer demands, more complete sentences. He noticed that people started explaining themselves before he asked, not out of fear, out of respect for the pause. The pause wasn't punishment, it was space. Space forced people to confront their own habits, and habits, once exposed, were hard to defend. One evening, Daniel overheard 2 co-workers speaking near the gate. "I hate waiting here," one said. "I don't," the other replied. "It means we're doing it right." Daniel pretended not to hear, but he wrote the time down anyway, not because it mattered, because it marked the moment waiting became normal. Weeks passed. The logbook grew thicker, not with incidents, with consistency, fewer errors, fewer exceptions, fewer people asking for favors. Daniel's job didn't become easier, it became clearer. And clarity, he realized, was another form of authority. He still wasn't asked for opinions. No one invited him into meetings, but his presence shaped how those meetings were prepared. People checked first. They slowed down. They waited. And without raising his voice, without changing his posture, without ever saying no more than he had before, Daniel had altered the pace of the entire building, all by letting the pause do the work. The first time Daniel noticed it, no one said anything. That was the point. It was early evening, just before the shift changed. The lobby behind the gate was quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that came from people waiting rather than leaving. 3 employees stood a few steps back from the entrance, not rushing, not complaining, waiting. Daniel checked the screen. Everything was green. Still, no one moved. Finally, one of them looked up. "Are we good?" he asked. Daniel nodded. "Yes," he said. Only then did they step forward. It took Daniel a moment to understand what had changed. They weren't waiting for permission. They were waiting for certainty. And somewhere along the way, he had become part of that certainty. Nothing official followed. No memo went out explaining new procedures. Yet no meeting was held to redefine roles. But the building adapted. People started arriving earlier. They prepared documents before they needed them. They stopped assuming someone else would smooth things over at the last minute. Daniel didn't enforce any of this. He simply stayed consistent. Consistency, he learned, taught people more than rules ever did. One night, a junior employee approached the gate, clearly nervous. "I'm not sure if this is okay," she said, holding up her badge. "If it's not, I can come back tomorrow." Daniel checked the system. "It's fine," he said. She exhaled, relieved. "Thank you for checking," she added. Daniel paused. No one had ever thanked him for checking before. "You're welcome," he said. After that, it happened more often. People thanked him. They waited without being asked. That they stopped treating delays like obstacles and started treating them like signals. Daniel noticed fewer mistakes, not because people were smarter, because they were more careful. Late one night, as Daniel closed the logbook, his supervisor stopped by the desk. "You've got a good handle on things," the supervisor said casually. Daniel nodded. "I try to keep it steady," he replied. The supervisor hesitated. "People listen to you," he said, "even when you don't say much." Daniel thought about that after the supervisor left. He had spent years believing authority came from volume, from giving instructions, from correcting people. He knew now that authority could also come from restraint, from knowing when to speak and when to wait. On his way out at the end of the shift, Daniel looked back at the gate. It hadn't changed. Same metal frame, same scanner, same lock. But the way people approached it had. They slowed down. They looked up. They paid attention. Daniel turned off the lights and stepped into the cool night air. He wasn't important in the way stories usually describe. He didn't make decisions. He didn't sit in meetings. He didn't sign anything that carried weight. But he had changed the rhythm. And once a rhythm changes, everything that moves through it has to adjust. That was enough. Some people lead by speaking louder, others lead by moving faster, and some people lead by waiting. Not to block the way, but to make sure it's the right one. If this story felt familiar, it's probably because you've met someone like Daniel before, or maybe you've been him. If you believe quiet consistency still matters, she'll leave a comment with the word "wait" and share this story with someone who doesn't need to be loud to be important. Subscribe for more stories about ordinary people who change things without making noise.